Third episode of Nuts About Thrust. We're of course talking about aviation maintenance, but today it is just John and I, the main guys here. I'm very excited to talk to you about some things that I am curious about. Some of those things being around the industry of aviation maintenance and the shortage that we see is there still. It seems like it's at an all-time high, but maybe you can tell me a little more about that. And by the end of this podcast, I would like to hear a little bit about how you would maneuver if you're just now entering the industry, or even if you're like a beginning student. So, we'll get to all that. But thanks again, John, for joining us. I wanted to ask you, is there a shortage for mechanics right now in the aviation industry?
Yeah,
Just straight up. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
we kind of talked about this morning.
hmm
Me and Patrick talked about it a little bit last week as kind of his motivator for wanting to start a Part 147 school was, his need to be able to hire AMPs for the flight school. And as we look at it as a whole, there is a huge shortage. There's a large demand. I have people ask me every day when they're coming to talk to me about the school, what does the job outlook look like?
hmm
And it's really better. It's better and or worse depending on what side of it you're on. It's better than it has ever been. Salaries are skyrocketing because there is a huge demand.
hmm
I would go out on a limb and say every maintenance shop on this airport and in North Texas is currently hiring.
Yeah.
And when there is large amounts of demand, what does that do to pay rates? It increases them.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, that makes
I
me.
think I read, ATEC is an organization that we're part of. It's the Aviation Technical Education Council. And they put out kind of what they call the pipeline report.
hmm
So how many new mechanics are being certificated? How many mechanics are retiring? How many mechanics are going to be needed in the next 10 years? Currently, the current age, what I was reading from this morning, the current age of the current average age of the mechanic of a mechanic in the U.S. is 53 years old, which puts that 11 years older than the average worker in the workforce, right? Which I would say is pretty significant.
Yeah.
They also said that in the next 10 years, 1 out of 3 aviation technicians, are going to retire.
hmm
So that puts even more strain on everyone that's trying to hire, qualified individuals.
And not to mention, it sounds like fleets are only getting bigger and
Yeah.
new planes are coming out every day.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like we introduced, what was it, like 6 new different types of large airline planes
Yeah,
in
so
the
the
2010s.
airlines are getting
So,
bigger and growing, and the demand for air travel is getting larger and larger,
Yeah.
worldwide.
Right.
I think the Boeing report says that over the next 10 years, there's going to be a need for 2 million additional aircraft technicians worldwide. 690 something thousand directly in North America. And if we look at how many AMP certificates that the FAA issued last year, was like 7,100. And they
Okay.
also estimate that 7,500 mechanics retired. So we didn't even make up the shortage just replacing people that are retiring, let alone try to get to that number
hmm
of 690,000 short in the US, right?
Yeah, and so you can even summarize that by saying, if I'm not wrong, right, you're saying that people are retiring faster than we are even recruiting.
Yeah, so people are retiring faster than we're even replacing them.
hmm
And then as air travel, the demand for air travel starts to increase and these airlines are getting larger and larger, they're going to need more technicians, right?
hmm
And that's going to trickle down to all the other areas around aviation, right? Because
Yep.
as an airframe and power plant mechanic, I can work at an airline, or I can
Mhm.
also work general aviation. I can work on helicopters. I can work in lots of different sectors. I can work at overhaul centers, all these different types of jobs that I can take.
hmm
But the airline kind of really drives, they are really driving the demand,
Yeah.
right?
Well, it sounds like one benefit to being an AMP would be that there is a versatile way to apply yourself in the industry, whether it be at an airline or maybe a somewhere private or something like that. But it's when people hear about the shortage, do they not often kind of raise their brow and think to themselves, "Oh, why is there such a shortage? Like, is it that people don't want to do it, or is what's kind of going on behind the scenes that makes it not want to do it?" Because I also a moment ago you did mention, "Oh, salaries are skyrocketing. So it sounds like maybe there were some problems around in that area, and maybe that's changing. I'm just curious about what
Yeah, I mean,
is
so for a
happening.
long time, like anything around aviation, the
Mm-hmm.
salaries were relatively low.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it had to be, there was more supply than there was demand. I think I was talking to Mike Fisher, who is Thrust Flight's director of maintenance, and he was talking about when he first got at AMP school, like there just weren't a lot of jobs.
Right.
A lot of the people he graduated with actually didn't go work as aircraft mechanics. They got jobs at other places.
Mm.
People would go work at, we'd laugh, people go work at Six Flags,
Mm-hmm.
the amusement park. They hired AMPs to maintain the roller
It's
coasters.
crazy.
Um, when I was, I'd say probably 15 years ago, a lot of people left aviation, went to go work in wind. So
Mm.
they were, doing
Turbines.
inspections on the big wind turbines that are out all over West Texas and really the western part of the United States. So people were leaving the industry. I really think it really boils down. I don't know that it boils down to, but there was a stigma around trades for a long
Mm-hmm.
time, right? I even think back to my parents.
Yeah.
We were always told, and teachers I had when I was a kid in elementary school, like, hey, you have to go to college. If
Yeah.
you don't go to college, you're not going to be successful, right? Do you want to be a plumber when you grow up? Well, I would say today plumbers make $70 an hour. Like, it doesn't
Right.
sound
And
like a bad thing.
right. And there's not like a cap. You
Yeah,
can own your own business, and it's
yeah,
trade. It's not going to go out of business.
right.
So,
And
anyways.
so those teachers that were telling kids, do you want to go be a plumber or do you want to be an electrician or a roofer when you grow up? Now those individuals that are doing those things are making twice as much as their teachers. You
Mm-hmm.
know, however you think about that, but
Yeah.
that is what it is because not college has is for certain people, but it is not for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just a culture thing that we were all kind of, hey, if you don't go to college, you're not going to be successful. And then we end up with a bunch of college graduates that have no jobs,
Mm-hmm.
right? No life skills, and there's not a lot of career opportunities when every single person graduating high school goes on and goes to college, and all of them are in line at Starbucks trying to get a job,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or at the geek bar at Apple or
Mm-hmm.
wherever.
Yeah.
Um, and so, if you pick a trade, you have a real usable life skill that's never going to go away.
Right.
One of the things that I talk about with being an aircraft mechanic is it's different than being a diesel technician.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the big aspect there, the big difference is, as a diesel mechanic, like think about how large, those big trucks are, right? Maintaining those and pulling tires off, pulling wheels off, you know, a 3-inch lug nut that's
Mm-hmm.
torqued at 1,000 foot-pounds, right? Like that's hard on your body.
Yeah.
You can't do that your whole life. But as an aircraft mechanic, you're doing a lot of inspections, you're doing a lot of paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
Not that that's boring, but the things aren't as big that you're doing maintenance on, so you have a
Mm-hmm.
lot more longevity,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not as hard on your
And
body.
that shows even in the statistics showed earlier when although most people seem to be a little bit older in the industry, it also goes to show that you can be and have that longevity.
Yeah,
So that makes
and it's
sense.
a respectable
Yeah.
job that it's a career.
Yeah, I think personally, I mean, I'm a bit younger, but like it seems like the rhetoric around college is finally shifting a little bit more to where, um, you know, options seem to be a little bit more open-minded. People can do more and not have as much to say about it. I mean, at this point, like you said, you can get a degree and make less than someone who doesn't have a degree or work next to them, you know. It's really just how you want to approach life, and sometimes you don't know until you know, but I think that rhetoric is changing a little bit. I was also told, you definitely should go to college, but I don't know, I hear a lot less people speak that way now, and maybe it's cuz I'm not that young anymore either. So, you think that'll make an impact on how many people tend to consider the career as an A and B?
Yeah, I think that it's really changing, and even with the pilot shortage, pilots at major airlines used to be required to have a bachelor's degree, and
Oh,
the airlines have done away with that requirement.
okay.
And so that's where people are able to be, you know, major, pilots at the major airlines, not necessarily younger, but without going and having a degree in whatever, because
Yeah.
like that made them more qualified to be an airline pilot.
Yeah.
Um, on the maintenance side, you do not have to have a bachelor's degree to get into most mechanic jobs, even into most of the management positions that are available. You just work hard and, you know, do what you're supposed to do, and you can move forward, right?
And
Like,
that makes sense to me anyways.
yeah,
Even when you get a degree, usually you have to get on the job training or even do, free work for a little while. Not free work, but what's it called? Internships.
yeah.
So I mean, it makes sense to be able to enter a workforce and hopefully get trained to do your job.
With all this, massive amounts of demand,
Hmm.
obviously the pay is going to increase.
And that's what it was, massive demand.
And with that, when, people start talking about being able to make, have 6-figure incomes by the time they're 20 years old or 21 years old, it's much different than it was, even 5-6 years ago.
Mhm.
Right. And, we talk to these young kids, like, you're going to be making more money than your friends will make when they graduate from college, and your schooling is going to take you 12 months.
Mhm.
Your friends will be coming home from their first year at school. They're going to be $40,000 in debt.
Mhm.
You're going to be working,
Right.
right? Like starting your career,
Yeah.
moving into different things and different avenues. And there are very, it can be very lucrative
Yeah.
as well. It's very fulfilling. Any job that you do you have to enjoy it,
Mhm.
right? You have to love it. But you also need to get, you need to be compensated, right?
Mhm.
And as an aircraft mechanic, with all of the additional, that demand that we're talking about,
Mhm.
we're not even making as many as are retiring every year.
Right.
So that those pay rates are just going to continue to go up.
Yeah.
The airlines are going to start fighting over, hiring people from one side to the other.
I
I don't know
I
if you
hear it's
got,
pretty competitive that way
yeah.
too.
And, uh, Boeing is a large manufacturer in the United States, so we
Mhm.
use a lot of things from them. But I think it was in 2019, even this was starting pre-pandemic. They went to their main labor union and said, "Hey, we want to pay you more money," because they're
Mhm.
trying to, they negotiated the contract up because they were
Yeah.
worried of losing skilled staff,
Uh-huh.
right? And they were losing a lot of skilled staff as you start to retire older, more experienced, not older, but more experienced technicians, and it's replaced with all young, unskilled technicians, and there's no real handover. I think some of that happens, like a lot of that kind of, they would call it tribal knowledge,
Mhm.
things that you can't really learn in school. You have to learn by being on the job and having someone there to mentor you.
Mhm. Yeah, and without even going all the way into those details of like the union and like who debated what, I I also saw when I was reading today that that same contract, some people say that it went one way or another who benefited the most, right? You could talk about that all day, I'm sure, but they say it's up for renegotiation September of this year,
Yeah.
actually. So and they're already someone who's, I think I saw someone, I don't know if it was Boeing, but one union negotiated with their manufacturer that they would make 21% more than they did before. Like that's how much of an increase that one jump made, and that was like, I mean, years ago already. So it seems like the competitiveness of the pay continues to push the prices or salaries up.
Yeah, because
So yeah.
at the end of the day, no one wants to overpay for anything. But if your staff is going to go work somewhere else for more money,
Hmm.
right, then it doesn't matter how much better your product is if you can't deliver it,
Yeah.
right? Like, then you might as well not have a product. So labor is a very important aspect. It's also typically the most expensive cost that any business has.
Right. Right.
Um, even a company like Boeing, where you think of, they're building these gigantic airplanes, right?
Right.
Their biggest cost is labor.
Wow.
And that's
You think
always
about it
going,
that way, yeah.
yeah, it's always going to be that way.
Okay.
Even airlines, you think about all the jet fuel they burn,
Hmm.
the billions of dollars worth of airplanes that they have, the
Hmm.
real estate on airports, their biggest costs are always labor.
Yeah. Well, then to shift it a little bit, so you have plenty of students over there at the Thrust Institute of Maintenance, and they're entering this training program, this 12-month training program,
Right.
and they're going to be entering the workforce in whichever way they desire based on what they know, I guess,
Right.
and within y'all's direction. But uh, do you know typically what these people, what your students' outlook is on the industry? Like, are they aware of sort of the benefits or some of the challenges they may face entering the industry?
Yeah. So, they are aware.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've talked about this before. We go on field trips and go
Uh-huh.
visit manufacturers and see different places, different
Mm-hmm.
job opportunities. And for the companies that we're going to see, it's recruiting events for them. they want to hire all of our graduates.
Yeah.
The front desk or the phone at the front desk rings,
It does.
nonstop.
It does.
And I would say we receive 5 to 10 phone calls a week from companies looking to hire graduates.
That's crazy. Yeah.
And we're a relatively small A&P school.
Mhm.
Everyone is searching for just qualified mechanics.
Yeah. I mean, so much so that, like you said, Patrick and you would talk about having a school so that you could at least have somewhere to pull mechanics from.
Yeah,
if
like
you really need
Patrick.
to.
So Patrick started a school, like quite literally, to build mechanics for the flight school.
That makes sense. Yeah. Well,
I don't know that I don't know that Thrust Flight will be able to hire all of our graduates, and I don't know that all of our graduates want to go work at a flight school. There's so many different types of A&P jobs out there, so it just really depends on what you're passionate about. If you like being around small planes, and we talk about that you pay a little bit because you only work Monday through Friday during the day versus working at an airline. You're going to have a night shift, or you might have to work on the weekends, things like that. So when I say you pay for it, like you don't quite make as much money,
right? Yeah.
But you're trading a quality of life, or you're making maybe not a quality of life, but just a life decision.
Right.
I don't know that when I was in my early 20s, I wouldn't have minded working at night. Wouldn't have bothered me any. But
sometimes I liked working at night because have you ever? I remember before one of my jobs, the job I was working previously, I was able to go to the DP, not DP.
The DMV.
Oh my goodness, I've been doing too many podcasts. So I was able to go get my tires done or go to the DMV or whatever during the day. And I mean, I was never in traffic, so I didn't mind necessarily always not having to work Monday through Friday. That was kind of nice at one point.
Yeah.
The reason I asked about whether or not they're kind of understanding what they're getting into as soon as they graduate is because I'm also wondering, maybe this is part of the program. I'm not sure. I'm wondering how they kind of maneuver some of those things when they graduate. Do they typically kind of know which way they want to go? From what you've heard, I heard one kid talking about how they wanted to. I say one kid, one of your students. We have people of all ages there, but one of the students, and he is young, was talking about how he wanted to go to, I think, France or something, and I have no idea what he was going to do over there, but it just sounds.
They want to go work all over and do different things. It's kind of it's neat to see them. We have one student that is confirmed. He has an apprenticeship spot at Southwest Airlines. So Southwest Airlines will hire you as a new A&P, but you have to start as an apprentice in their program. So even though you're licensed, you're still considered it's just a job position, right?
Right, but it's a paid. I mean, apprentices are paid, right?
Yeah. So at Southwest, it's an absolutely a paid apprenticeship. I'm sure you could look up the pay scale on their collective bargaining agreement. It's readily available on the internet.
Yeah.
But they do that for 18 months or 24 months before they transition into being an aircraft mechanic. I have a couple other students that are interested in jobs at Southwest. We have some interviews set up with them. We have, they're all creating LinkedIn profiles, and we're helping them create resumes and do things like that as well. It's all kind of part of the mentorship program that they get while they're part of Thrust.
Okay, and that's part of what one of my next questions was going to be, and I asked the same thing to Patrick when he was on for Thrust Flight. I'm very interested to know what are some tips maybe you would suggest people focusing on when it comes to, hey, I'm graduating and I'm looking for a job. Maybe I don't even know what I want to do. Do you suggest focus on LinkedIn a little bit? I mean, are there certain types of events or
well, I would say that if you're in school, create a LinkedIn. Yeah. Start looking for people that are working in the industry that you're trying to work in, and start creating those connections. Engage with people. Be available. Yeah. Right. It's all about kind of that network that you build, where people will be more willing to help you out. Yeah. Right? As far as people applying for jobs, we tell them write a good cover letter and just apply.
The demand's there. So.
The demand is there. It's not, you're not going to be begging for a job, right? You're going to be making a decision on which job you're going to take that best fits your needs. So theoretically, we have seen instances where people graduate from AMT school and go directly to American Airlines. Typically, the real path would be go work for Envoy for 2 to 3 years and then go from Envoy to American Airlines, similar to what the pilots would do. But the
From
difference,
regional to like what international?
yeah, regional to a major, right?
Okay.
But the difference from an AMP student to a flight school student is, so you finish flight school, you have 120 hours, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or I don't know what and then you have to get a job as a flight instructor, or you have to get a job doing something to go from that. Standard commercial hours is 250 hours to the 1,500 hours required to become an airline transport pilot. Right. So what do you do for that time period?
What? A lot of people are instructors. Right?
A lot of people are instructors,
yeah.
right? So they're working at a flight school, right? They're not making airline money, right? So you have another year and a half bridge, or 2 years, depending on your kind of how fast you get through it, weather, whatever. As an AMP, you're immediately graduating and going to work.
Yeah.
Right.
That makes
sense. You
sense.
could go to major, you could go to major airlines. Envoy is coming in a couple weeks. The vice president of maintenance recruiting is coming out to come talk to the students.
Okay.
Like I said, everyone is trying to actively recruit, graduates from not just our school, it's every school. They're doing that kind of all around the country. Yeah. Because like we just talked about, 7,500 retired, only 7,100 were licensed.
It's declining. And
then if you have a growth, right? So there's growth on top of just retirement, just attrition. Yeah. We're not even replacing what the natural attrition piece is, right? So they're all competing with each other. And that's a great thing for people entering the workforce. Yeah. It's a bad thing for the airline, right? It's a bad thing for individual employers, but for the individual people, like the mechanics, it's a good thing.
I wanted to take it all the way back to, let's say someone's thinking about attending Thrust Institute of Maintenance or any other maintenance school. Are there anything that you would say they would want to take into account, or are there ways to prepare to better succeed at school? I'm wondering if there's any tips from you for people who are thinking about that.
If we're talking about interviewing schools, right? So you go around, I would say, my advice when you're picking an AMP school is don't pick the first, don't only visit one, right? Go talk to everyone, talk about their program, talk about what they have to offer. I know that we've talked about this a lot, but I think one of the most important things is the instructor to student ratio. You want to make sure that you have an instructor that's available to help answer your questions. Yeah. And I would say if you're on the fence about it, go for it somewhere, anywhere, right? Yeah. Like it is a fantastic career. I've been doing it, my whole life. It's really all that I've ever known professionally. And I would not for a second think about getting out of aviation. It's something that I absolutely love.
That's coming from someone who's been doing it their whole life. So I mean, that's quite a testament. So
well, I guess if I didn't love it, I might be doing something else, maybe.
Right, you'd already be elsewhere, probably. Yeah, at that point.
So for the guys in the room,
yeah,
I know you guys do a wonderful job of producing all of our content. But if you wanted to, we have a night class that's starting in August.
Yeah,
we'll get you signed up.
Hey, man,
get you signed up. 12 short months, and you can become an AMP.
I'm gonna have to do it. Yeah, is it free? Did I get an employee discount? So, since you did mention other trade opportunities, like maybe even becoming an electrician or a plumber, I mean, I don't know if you've been any of those things, but is there any reason why you think it would be better even to maybe steer towards being an AMP?
Oh yeah, I mean, so fun fact about John: when I was in high school, I worked for a company. We did plumbing and HVAC, like air conditioning in homes, and did residential and commercial work. And there's a lot of digging in the mud, and nobody wants to find out why a toilet's clogged. While there's nothing wrong with those types of jobs, that's not typically something you do as an aircraft mechanic.
Right.
So you can stay out of those types of things, and typically the environments are a lot nicer, right? So you're working in a nice clean hangar, might even be climate controlled. Just like I said previously with the diesel mechanic thing, it really is about longevity. It's something you can do much later into your life and not have to worry or focus on getting some sort of job that's more on the management side because your body is not able to keep up with you anymore.
Now that it's kind of brings me back to, you have answered this before. Did you know what you were getting into when you were getting your license? I mean, I know you went into the military, right?
Yeah, so I was in
Yeah.
the Army.
Yeah. So, yes, you went in the Army. What I'm wondering is, even in the Army, you have options sometimes on which direction you'd like to go. I mean, did you know what you were getting into? Was it really well thought out?
No, of
Yeah.
course it wasn't well thought out. I mean, it's just uh, I heard this commencement speech by Steve Jobs one
Mm-hmm.
time, and he talks about um, getting fired from Apple
Mm-hmm.
and like what that enabled him to do, right? So he had this huge company that he had founded and he got fired. And from that, he was able to create Pixar,
Yeah.
right? And so
Mm-hmm.
Pixar created Toy Story.
Right.
So like when he dropped out of college and he had these middle class parents that were going to be so upset with him, and he didn't move back home right away. He was sleeping on his friend's couch,
Mm-hmm.
and he would just go show up to campus and like sit in on classes. And he said that he sat in on a calligraphy class, and that's why he created so many different fonts. And he said, and that's why, when Microsoft stole all his designs, that's why they had so many different fonts, and that's why we have more than just one font today. And it was really interesting to hear him talk about how at the time decisions that he made didn't make a lot of sense, or he didn't think that they would really amount to anything, but turned out to be something really special.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then he talks about, like, I thought the most interesting example was getting fired from the company that he started, and that caused him to be able to create Pixar, which created Toy Story.
Right.
Fantastic movie.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I asked, because I guess I was just curious as to like how you would view how decisions you didn't know the impact they would have. I'm curious about how you view those impacts after the fact. I mean, isn't that kind of interesting? I guess, to think about.
And I always,
So,
good or bad,
mhm.
every significant event in my life has led to something, really working out.
Yeah,
And now, while at the time you don't always think that it's the greatest thing that's going on, it it will work out, and it'll
right,
lead on to something great.
right. So even if we sit here and talk about all these statistics, we can talk about the industry, we can talk about all these manufacturers, and from hearing you talk about you doing this for so long, the underlying principle seems to be to do mostly what you want. Of
Yeah,
course, with
do what
some
feels right.
strategy.
Like,
Yeah,
yeah, like listen to yourself. There's
yeah,
obviously strategy
yeah,
involved, but you have to, follow your heart,
yeah.
right? Like, go after what you love,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
um,
Usually a lot less to regret that way.
yeah,
Yeah. So it seems like, well, I mean, I'm not sure if we have a whole
no,
lot more to
no
talk about,
regrets,
but
or man,
yeah, no regrets. No, how do you say it? No regrets.
regrets,
No regrets. I don't remember,
no
but none of
regrets,
those.
bro.
I don't regrets anything.
Not even one letter.
Not even one letter. If you don't know the movie, then I'm sorry. If you do know the movie, go ahead and put it in the
Comment,
comments.
yeah,
Yeah, go in the
comment
comment
below.
section, and if there's other lines that are your favorite, go ahead and put those in the comment section. Hopefully appropriate, please. But otherwise, I would like to thank everybody for joining us on the third episode of Nuts About Thrust. Of course, I love sitting down with John and getting to know a little bit more about you. I feel like you always tell me something new about you every time we do this.
Oh
So
yeah, it's like an onion. Thanks for having me, Zach. Like I said,
absolutely,
for those of you watching, give us one of those thumbs up. It's Zach's favorite thing.
it is.
So give us a like, subscribe, comment below. Comment below. We'll be having a special guest coming up next week. So stay tuned for that. We're real excited to have him.
Yeah.
But
Until next time, we'll see you then.
yeah.